The story begins with a marriage conspiracy. She, Princess Lin'an of Dasheng, is skilled in literature and martial arts. In order to rescue her friend who had been married for her, she disguised herself as a man and hid her identity, stepping into the grassland. He, the god of grassland wolves, Yi Hu, is ruthless and has achieved great military success, but he is forced into the struggle for the Khan's throne. First encounter of confrontation, each with injuries, the grassland is difficult, and several times almost revealing one's identity. In the end, she schemed to become his staff, hoping to leave with her friends, but she didn't want to get married, which was a conspiracy of Dasheng colluding with the grassland. For a moment, her identity was impersonated by a fake princess, but she was pursued and subsequently framed as a traitor to the enemy. In the face of unexpected events, she went through various tribal meetings, conflicts between martial arts alliance leaders, and palace upheavals over time. Huyan Xingqi successfully discovered that his good brother was not quite right. "My martial arts friend Sheng Yuer angrily said as she took out her money, I'm not your money bag." At the height of the temple and the distance of the rivers and lakes, when the crisis arrived, the legend of one sword, frost and cold in 14 provinces reappeared in the rivers and lakes. This is a story of growth, where chivalry and justice come first. But with a solitary sword, guard Chang'an. P.S. Double strength. Rivers and lakes political conspiracies. The male and female protagonists actually have an intersection for a long time. Keywords of the novel. Empress Lin'an so no pop-ups. Download the complete collection of Empress Lin'an so txt, and read the latest chapters of Empress Lin'an so. 1. Chapter 1 Preface. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1 Preface Dasheng Qiao. It's just a matter of marriage. Women from the royal family are born with such a responsibility. Princess Yongping, please go to the grassland for marriage on your behalf, which is a model for everyone. Princess Lin'an has just returned from her study tour, so it's normal for her not to understand. Chu Qinyan glanced coldly at Wang Taifu, who was saying this. I am not as knowledgeable as the grand tutor in this palace, but I know that the king has died and the country is in danger. Why do I use women as an article? Our country is prosperous and our army is strong, so why do I underestimate myself? Wang Taifu held the Hu board in his hand and smiled calmly. Marriage is for the benefit of the people and for the glory of Dasheng. But it is the princess who sets an example for all women in the world. How can she be so aggressive? Upon hearing this, Chu Qinyan also smiled. I heard that Li Khan also had a princess. Why didn't the grand tutor marry his son over to bring glory to the country? Absurdity. Absurdity. Wang Taifu immediately turned a cold face and pointed at her angrily. Chu Qinyan remained expressionless and said, the grand tutor is a role model for all officials. How could he be so expressionless in his words and actions? Wang Taifu choked on his words, and even the people who wanted to come forward to support him lost their minds. The civil officials were corrupt, while the military officials were weak. Chu Qinyan scanned the crowd, knowing that there was no hope of arguing anymore. Finally, she glanced at the grand tutor Wang and began to mock him lightly. Of course you can be light-hearted, because it is the fate of others that determines. If you only aim for stability in times of crisis, how can our country's dignity stand on its own? No one saved Pei Hua, she went. This is a story of mutual redemption, as well as a story of a woman who does not follow fate. She fights, she snatches, and she wants to fight for justice from this world. But with a lone sword, guard Chang'an. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. 1 Qiao loading into the grassland. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2-1. Disguising into the grassland. Huyan tribe. Wang, the person has arrived. Scar leader humbly bowed and brought up more than 10 slaves, then he lowered his head and retreated to the side. The night on the grassland is a bit cold, even on a July day. There is a stove lit in the tent, and flames are popping up with a crackling sound. The atmosphere inside the tent is low. In a few days, it will be the Huli Lutai conference. Do you want me to bring these goods? Huyen Sufeng only looked up and then lowered his head to tease the person in his arms. The Scar leader, who led the slaves, was immediately frightened and knelt down. Wang, I have already brought all the people from the surrounding tribes. These are all good. Looking. It's useless, let's kill it. Scar leader suddenly kowtowed and said, please spare your life. Wang, please spare your life. After the crowd, Chu Qinyan was taken aback. Huyen Sufeng has a handsome appearance, but he is holding a man. How could he be so masculine? According to the records of the 4 continents, he was in his prime and was the second son of the current Khan. He was born to his concubine, Lady Hai Yunduo, and was proficient in the art of power and strategy, which was deeply loved by the Khan. In recent years, he has been competing with the Grand Prince Huyen Gujin and other heirs for the position of Khan. Just take them down and distribute them to each account. Huyen Sufeng seemed to have lost his intention of killing, and Scar's leader, like being granted amnesty, hurriedly stood up to take people away. Chu Qinyan could hear the faint sighs of disappointment around him. Can disappointment not be left behind? Wang, let's have some grapes. This fruit has grown very well this year. The male attendant in Huyen Sufeng's arms spoke up, but he seemed uninterested. He turned his head to avoid him, his eyes tired, and coaxed him without much emotion, be good. However, it was this deviation that led him to discover an interesting silhouette. Wait a minute. Huyen Sufeng spoke slowly, and the people in front had to stop. The one in white clothes behind, turn around. Chu Qinyan felt a thump in her heart. She was at the end of both the entrance and exit, also dressed in white, but before she could figure it out, a man in coarse white clothes turned around in surprise and said, Wang, I'm willing to. Speaking of you, little dwarf. The man didn't even catch a glance when he saw Wang, who was standing tall, throw a grape beside him and coincidentally hit the person next to him in the head, rolling to his feet. Chu Qinyan was startled in her heart, but Scar leader had already signaled the others to leave. The man beside her gave her a fierce glare before leaving, as if killing his mother. Why does Huyen Sufeng call her? She turned around with her head down and remained motionless, but Huyen Sufeng asked her to come forward. Head up. He waved away the seductive man on his body, leaned forward on the throne, his long hair falling, and his face becoming even more handsome. However, his red phoenix eyes showed his fickleness and lack of righteousness. Chu Qinyan slowly lifted her head, and a snow-white little face caught his eye. Eyes and eyes are like a painting, deceiving frost over snow. A little crimson at the center of the eyebrows, like a beauty mole. What a pretty face. Come here, Huyen Sufeng spoke softly. Chu Qinyan clenched her fist, but she knew it was not easy to get into a fit. If she had known this, she should have wiped her face with flowers. Tisk. The person in front of him remained motionless, but Huyen Sufeng became impatient. He reached out to catch him, but the person in front of him flexibly dodged. His eyes lit up. Still a practitioner. Chu Qinyan completely instinctively avoided it, and when she realized it, she realized she shouldn't have, so she didn't move. Huyen Sufeng successfully caught her and sat down on the throne, breathing warm air close to her. Hide, why don't you hide? In an instant, Chu Qinyan's blood flowed back all over her body, and the place where his breath brushed over seemed to be on fire, her body stiffened and motionless. The person hugged her waist, unaware that Chu Qinyan was hesitating whether to draw out the weapon from her waist to give him a sword. Huyen Sufeng saw the crimson color gradually spreading from her collar to her neck, and her breath tightened, her eyes secretly darkening. Unfortunately, it's a man. He said such a thing for no reason, which made Chu Qinyan pause. Isn't he just liking men? Why do you think it's a pity? Seeing her puzzled expression, the guard next to her explained, men can only be harmed by our king. With a light smile, Huyen Sufeng did not deny it, but inexplicably approached her, pressing his lips against her ear and breathing, "Did you hear me? You can only be harmed by me. Beauty, why don't you speak?" His almost greedy breath penetrated her neck. Chu Qinyan suddenly wanted to pull off her men's clothing and hit him in the face. "Wang, he can't be mute, can he?" Someone puzzled as he remained silent. Chu Qingyan's eyes lit up, and suddenly she had a plan in her mind. She stroked his hand away and quickly bounced it away from him, avoiding his eyes. She lowered her head and raised her hand, gesturing, "Ah! Ah! What a mute!" exclaimed someone beside me. "Scar face is becoming more and more outrageous, anyone can be recruited." Upon learning that she was mute, Huyen Sufeng did not change his face. Instead, he propped up his head and watched her gesturing, his eyes flickering. Until Chu Qinyan was about to lose control, he finally spoke slowly, "Since that's the case, send him back to the slave camp and wait for the distribution." Huyen Sufeng finally let her go. Chu Qinyan breathed a sigh of relief. Whether he believed it or not, she contacted the guards and took Pei Hua away as soon as possible. When she returned to the wooden house, the previous man in white seemed to vent his anger, sarcastically speaking before falling asleep. Chu Qinyan didn't feel sleepy, leaning against the window, thousands of miles away from her hometown, gazing at the same starry sky. She came to the grassland to save Pei Hua, who had made the marriage for her, but she knew she wanted to take someone away and this matter needed to be considered in the long run. Half a month ago, she left Chang'an and disguised herself as a man, hiding her identity and entering the grassland. She was inexplicably chased and injured, and dispersed from the guards, hiding in the draft team of Huyen Sufeng. Until now, she has become a lowly slave on the grassland. Speaking of injury, the wound on her shoulder felt a faint pain. All of this was thanks to the leader of the madman, who only then knew how unpredictable the grassland people were. Haha. This article is about strong men and strong women, hoping that everyone can read and showcase their beauty. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Two Natural Enemy Collisions. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3-2. Natural Enemy Collision. Half a day ago. As soon as Chu Qinyan stepped into the grassland, she was inexplicably chased by someone. "Who sent you, Huyen Sufeng?" The blade of the Huyen star pool swept across, but failed to cut off the cover on the opponent's face. On the contrary, the opponent's body movements were eerie, and he quickly turned around and circled behind him. He flashed a hint of surprise in his eyes and turned to look at the young man in white. Chu Qinyan only then saw clearly the person who inexplicably pursued and dispersed her guard. She spoke coldly, "I don't know any Huyen Sufeng. If you don't want to die, just leave." Huyen Xingqi frowned, and the team led by this person were all elite. With a command, the team disappeared without a trace, and he personally caught up with the leader. If this person is really sent by Huyen Sufeng to kill him, he must not stay. At this moment, both sides launched attacks simultaneously. Her fingertips twitched slightly, soft silver threads shot out, but at the top was the tip of a knife, fluttering all over the sky, pointing directly at his vital point. He promptly sacrificed the dagger in his hand, simultaneously hit. "Seize your hands and leave you dead." Huyen Xingqi covered his abdomen, his hand stained red with blood, and he spoke coldly. "Idiot." Chu Qinyan sneered and pulled out the blood-stained dagger from her shoulder, provocatively throwing it to the ground, then turning around and disappearing into the vast night. Wang Ting is dozens of miles away, and Yi Hu has a large tent. Quick, fast, change the water. Stop the bleeding for him first. Inside and outside the large tent, pots of blood and water flowed out, and the people outside couldn't help but look at them frequently. Yi Hu was injured again. How serious is it this time? In the account. The witch doctor, you can give him a few more stitches, don't leave any diseased roots behind. It's all because of that thief who killed thousands of knives. He was so ruthless. When did Su Feng's subordinates have this kind of person? The witch doctor sweated throughout the entire process of treating his wound and finally breathed a sigh of relief before retreating. Deputy General Mutant hesitated and approached, staring at the wound on his waist and abdomen, slowly sweeping downwards. "Achi, are you okay?" The man replied coldly. Is everything okay elsewhere?" Huyen Xingqi heard Yan's forehead tighten and glanced up at him. He had a few stitches sewn into the flesh, and at this moment he was not feeling well. Sweat was oozing out from his forehead, and his eyebrows and eyes were also a bit tired. Mutant thought he was embarrassed and reached out to untie his waist belt. He tightened his body under Huyen Xingqi and opened him. "What are you doing? Let me give you a check. Up. Don't be shy, this is related to your lifelong happiness. Although you may not need it now, you will definitely need it in the future." The key is that the thief did not take any action lightly, and the wound was in the lower abdomen, not far from the critical area. Achi frowned from beginning to end, and he had reason to suspect that he had injured it there. Huyen Xingqi's face turned black as he reached out to pick up the clothes on the couch and put them on. "I'm fine," he said, "it's not up to you to decide whether there is anything." "Let me see. It's a symbol of men." Mu Dantai wanted to see. "I said I would be fine. If you are too free, go to practice." Mu Dan changed his strategy when he saw that he refused to eat either soft or hard. "Don't blame me for not reminding you. You're already old, and Khan will definitely send women to your tent soon. Don't be laughed at by others then." "The person today was not sent by Su Feng," Huyen Xingqi suddenly spoke. "No." Mu Dan reacted twice and immediately became serious. "Even if it's not, you can't take it lightly. Those people have gone crazy for the position of the Khan's heir." Huyen Xingqi didn't speak, but his face became even more stern. He was familiar with all the people under Su Feng's command. Moreover, if Su Feng wanted to get rid of him, he wouldn't kill anyone near the Wang court, so as not to cause him to be covered in blood. But today that person doesn't care about his life or death at all. Under the cover of night, he couldn't see the person's face clearly, only a pair of eyes, cold and decisive. "Is there anyone else passing by on the road tonight?" Mutant thought for a moment, then suddenly burst into a smile and said, "Yes, I met Su Feng's people, and he brought a group of men back. Each one looks handsome. Huyen Sufeng likes men and can't be considered a secret on the Grassland. Did that person hide in that team? I really don't know if I should pity him." Mutant slammed his lips and playfully licked his lips. Huyen Xingqi pinched his eyebrows and shook his head, saying, "He was injured quite a bit and his origin is unknown. I'm afraid he has a heart to enter the royal court." "What? He's too brave." Now, Mutant couldn't help but pinch his sweat. That person's skills are not bad. If he only falls into Su Feng's hands, there is still a chance to escape, but if he enters the royal court, he may. Moreover, as soon as they returned from their victory, the Khan wanted to seize military power, and the Huyen Sufeng assassinated them all the way to this point. The most important thing at the moment is to protect the military power in hand. If there is sudden chaos in the Wang court, the Khan will definitely attack them. Huyen Xingqi relaxed his eyebrows and his gaze was burning. "Prepare your horse and go to the royal court." Yi Hu. Ancient Turkic official name. His position was second only to that of the Khan, and he was a branch minister in a large tribe, equivalent to the Grand Governor of the Tang dynasty. It is often referred to as the descendants of Khan or the strong members of the clan. Belonging to hereditary duties. Mu Dan equals peony, end of this chapter. Chapter 4. Princess Lin'an. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4-3. Princess Lin'an. The next morning, someone took them to the royal court and divided them into various accounts, and Chu Qinyan was easily assigned to Pei Hua's account, becoming a lowly slave outside the account. The reason is that the person who was assigned to the account of Princess Yongping felt that there was no way out and bribed the supervisor, so she didn't put in much effort. But she didn't know that as soon as she left, the people of Huyan Sufeng went to the slave camp. Upon learning that she had been assigned to a different account, the visitor returned in fear to report. But all of this had nothing to do with her. At this moment, she had just been sent to the vicinity of Pei Hua's tent when she witnessed an attack. "Bitch! Do you dare to snatch Princess Tuya's hairpin?" With a slap, she slapped Jihua's face and covered her face with red eyes, watching as her hairpin was snatched away by Princess Tuya's maid. "This is clearly our princess's. It was given to her by Princess Lin'an." "Princess Lin'an." The maid disdainfully rolled her eyes and pinched her chin. "Where is she? Let her come and take it. Dare to grab things from the princess, go to hell with you." The maid kicked Jihua away and was about to commit violence again when a commotion erupted not far away. Someone shouted, "Xingqi Yi who is here?" The maid suddenly stopped and left with her companions. My companion sighed, "Unfortunately, I thought I could meet the legendary Princess Lin'an. I heard she was the most beautiful woman in Dasheng, and her swordsmanship was exceptional." Jihua stood up, wiped away tears, and limped back to the tent. Not far away, Chu Qinyan was watching all of this, his gaze following the figure of the maid who had gone far away, his gaze gradually turning cold. That hairpin was a gift she gave to Pei Hua, and she entrusted someone with a lot of money to search for the necessary materials. She personally crafted it. Seeking death. Jihua limped back, with red eyes and a swollen face. "Miss, it's all my fault. I couldn't protect the hairpin that Princess Tuya gave you, and it was snatched by Princess Tuya's people." Pei Hua took a towel and applied it to her face with a heart-wrenching expression. Upon hearing this, Lu frowned lightly and said, "Forget it, I'm not capable of protecting you or that hairpin. Knowing that painting is inevitably not worth it." As a knowledgeable and rational young lady from the Shangshu family, she left her hometown and came to this rough land to invite a marriage for the princess. She was also teased and bullied by others. "Miss, it's too difficult here. Let's write a letter to Lord Shangshu. All of this is not the fate you should bear." Jihua knelt at her feet, while Pei Hua brushed aside the maid she had always trusted the most. Her words were gentle and firm, "Since you know there are many deceitful things here, I'm just glad it's not her who came. Should I bear these things? Don't let me hear this again." Awakened by Pei Hua, Jihua calmed down and felt both ashamed and frightened. "Yes, I understand. The princess and the young lady are both good people. If only the princess were here, no one would dare to bully you." Upon hearing this, Pei Hua also fell into memories. Many women in Chang'an are skilled in music, chess, calligraphy, and painting, and few are like Ayan, who excels in both civil and martial arts. When she first met Ayan, her long sword was unsheathed and her hand was sharpened to bully the traffickers who sold her. She protects others not by status, but by real swords and swords. That year, when envoys from all over the world came, she became famous with one sword, and people praised her swordsmanship. 3,000 flowers fall in the hall, and with one sword, the frost is cold in 14 provinces. Yeah, it would be great if I had half of Ayan's abilities, but unfortunately, the mountains are high and the waters are far away. I wonder if we can still meet in this lifetime." When the master and servant were talking, a strange movement came from outside the tent, and Jihua could only approach with courage. "Who is outside?" There was a silence outside for a while. For a long time, Jihua thought there was no one around. Just as he was about to open the tent door, a figure suddenly flashed in outside. Jihua was so scared that he shouted, "Ah!" Fortunately, she was covered by the person who came, and Jihua blinked her eyes. At the moment she saw the person, she thought she was dreaming. Chu Qinyan let go of her, and she shouted in shock, "Princess Lin'an." She curled her lips and smiled, looking back to see Pei Hua whom she had not seen in a long time. Pei Hua stood up in shock, and the two of them looked at each other from afar. They thought someone had a lot to say, but at this moment, it was difficult to utter a word. Ian. Pei Hua rushed over and hugged her, trekking a long distance away from her homeland, being bullied, and all the grievances of the past few days erupted at this moment. Tears fell on Chu Qingyan's shoulder, and she didn't speak, just patting her back one by one. Jihua remained silent, turned his head and wiped away his tears. He went out to watch the door for the two of them. Pei Hua held her for a long time, until Chu Qingyan's coarse cloth clothes were wet by her. It was then that she suddenly remembered that Chu Qingyan should not have appeared here. She wiped away her tears and went to check Chu Qingyan. "Why are you here, still dressed like this?" "Ji Qin and the others. Have you been injured?" Chu Qingyan just pressed her down and sat down, turned around to put on a hairpin for her. "Sister, you have a lot of questions." Pei Hua touched the hairpin that should have been snatched from her head, feeling puzzled. This hairpin was snatched earlier. "Why are you here, the person who snatched the hairpin?" Chu Qingyan's expression was calm, even slightly smug. "Send her soul back to her hometown." Upon hearing this, Pei Hua's face was complex. She accepted Jie, but Yen protected her a lot. Ian. Approaching her, Chu Qingyan reassured her, "I'm teasing you, she hasn't died. I just arrived yesterday and encountered some trouble. Ji Qin and his team have temporarily separated from me. Don't worry." Pei Hua became anxious upon hearing this, and upon further questioning, she learned that she was injured. As she felt heartbroken, there was another wave of busyness. When she wanted to talk to Chu Qingyan again, Jihua hurriedly ran in from outside the tent and said, "Miss, someone from the golden tent said that Yi Hu has returned from the victory. Let's go see him too." Pei Hua was a bit panicked. She had just met Ian and hadn't even been able to say a few words. Why did Khan want to see her at this time? Perhaps he had discovered Ian. Chu Qingyan could see her panic and calmed her down. "You just go, I'll accompany you." The sisters reunited in the past, knowing that Hua was moved to cry, and I don't know why. No matter how difficult the situation is, as long as Princess Lin'an is there, people feel relieved. Chu Qingyan changed her outfit, bandaged her wound again, her long hair fell off, and her face darkened a bit. She finally didn't look so eye-catching. The grassland is vast, with abundant water and grass, and cattle and sheep are everywhere. Even in the royal court, slaves are relatively free. The grassland wolf god returned, and on the way to the golden tent, Chu Qingyan talked about this grassland wolf god everywhere. When she studied wars among various tribes in the past, she heard this name the most. Huyan Star Pool. Two kings meet. We're coming. We're coming. End of this chapter. Chapter 5.4 Trapped in a Murder Case. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5.4. Being trapped in a murder case. Khan's golden tent. The leaders of various tribes rushed to congratulate the Ili Khan. The people on the Khan's throne were about 40 in height, with a strong physique and a dignified face. Princess Yongping arrives. After waiting for a while, someone reported it outside the account. Chu Qingyan followed behind Pei Hua and entered, feeling various gazes. Everyone was curious about who the Princess Dasheng, who the Huyan tribe personally sought to marry, was. On behalf of Dasheng and Yongping, I wish Yi Hu a victorious return and wish the Khan all the blessings and peace. Pei Hua, wearing a veil and following the etiquette of Dasheng, was led to the seat. Chu Qingyan silently followed behind her, silently observing the crowd present. As she looked up, she accidentally collided with the person's gaze diagonally opposite her. She was suddenly startled and remembered the scene of fighting and chasing that night in her mind. Is it him? Lord Yi Hu is really young and promising. He will come to my tent another day and sit down. Naylan is thinking of you all day long. Someone is asking Huyan Xingqi for a conversation on the side. Chu Qinyan lowered her head as if nothing had happened, while Huyan Xingqi didn't seem to notice anything. Her expression was indifferent, and she quickly averted her gaze and went to talk to someone. Her heart was filled with turbulent waves. That night was too dark, and the crazy leader who was chasing her probably didn't see her clearly, but she saw the other person very well. She never expected that the other person would actually be the Grassland Leaf Protector, Huyan Star Pool. Why did Huyan Xingqi want to kill her? By the way, he thought she was sent by Huyan Sufeng to kill him. As her gaze swept over his lower abdomen, Chu Qinyan felt the wound on her shoulder start to hurt again. I was momentarily stunned, and only after Chu Qinyan regained consciousness did I notice another sharp gaze. Huyan Sufeng's eyes were burning, playing with a wine glass in his hand, and he looked at her without hesitation. I almost forgot that she just escaped from Huyan Sufeng last night, and she was still mute in Huyan Sufeng's eyes. My younger brother Achi is truly the son of the Grassland Wolf God. Over the years, thanks to Achi's efforts to fight for Ben Khan outside and eliminate all those who have ulterior motives, I can make the Huyan clan dominate in this northern region. Huyan Ili sat on the top sweating seat, listening to everyone's compliments on him. He sent someone to give him a glass of wine, and then raised it towards the Huyan Star Pool, laughing profusely. However, after all, Ben Han is old. Recently, for some unknown reason, his energy has become increasingly weak and his mind has become restless. With the Khan's words, everyone remained silent, each speculating about his intentions in their hearts. Chu Qinyan sneered in her heart. Huyan Ili was as suspicious as legend suggests, hoping to learn from the former emperor and play with a cup of wine to release his military power. Khan is in his prime, still brave and fearless. After a moment of silence, Prime Minister Qi, who had previously spoken with Huyan Xingqi, spoke first, and everyone followed closely in agreement. Yes, yes. A few days ago, when we were hunting in the north, you should be Khan. You have hunted the most prey. Huyan Ili remained silent, only staring coldly at the Huyan Star Pool below. After returning victorious, they were afraid of being beaten or even seized power. The courtiers were moved and felt pity for the young son of the former Khan. The military power in Lord Yihu's hands may not be preserved. 2 days later will be the Hulilitai conference, and perhaps the Khan is worried about it. Huyan Xingqi drank the liquor that was handed to his lips and answered him vaguely, without mentioning the issue of military power. His words happened to remind Huyan Ili that 2 days later at the Hulilitai conference, he was still needed to form alliances with various tribes, and Huyan Ili seemed to punch cotton. He had to give up for now, and Sun Yu too taught his 2 sons a lesson. From the first encounter to the present meeting, Chu Qinyan has roughly understood the situation of the Huyan tribe, as well as the Grassland Wolf God, Lord Yihu. Huyan Xingqi and Huyan Ili are cousins. It is said that the old Khan was originally preparing to pass on the throne to his young son Huyan Xingqi, but considering his youth, in order to ensure the stability of the Grassland, he had to abdicate to Huyan Ili. Over the years, as the Huyan Star Pool became more colorful, he naturally became more wary of it. As soon as Huyan Xingqi won, he couldn't wait to regain power. Father's sweat, father's sweat. There was a commotion outside, accompanied by a voice that said, Princess Tuya is here. A girl dressed in luxurious attire and with a charming appearance stepped into the golden tent accompanied by a silver bell. The girl was still dressed in strong attire, with a face full of anger, but when she saw the Huyan Star Pool, she felt a hint of shyness. Tuya, why don't you worry about riding your horse and shooting arrows? Huyan Ili has always been very fond of his youngest daughter, and seeing her staring at Huyan Xingqi with spring in her eyes, he couldn't help but feel displeased. Brother Xingqi, you're back. Tuya misses you so much. No matter how you come back, you won't come looking for me. Huyan Ili stroked her forehead in frustration. This girl always stubbornly called Huyan Xingqi her brother, and it was clearly her uncle. Huyen Xingqi ignored it and was interrupted by Yili's voice. Tuya then remembered the matter with an angry expression on her face and turned to point her finger at Pei Hua. Princess of Dasheng, she killed my maid. What? Everyone's gaze followed Huyen Tuya's fingers and looked straight over. Pei Hua was surprised in her heart, and Chu Qinyan secretly helped Xihua, who was about to fall. Everyone's expressions were serious and eerie. Why did the princess say such a thing? I have just arrived and I am no match for others. Why did I kill your maid? Does Princess Tuya have any evidence? Tuya snorted coldly and looked arrogant. Someone saw that your maid had a conflict with my maid this morning, and she died at noon. It must be your deliberate revenge. Father Khan, those are my favorite maids. You must not let them go. Pei Hua's expression was full of humiliation, and she spoke firmly, Khan, Princess Tuya falsely accused me for no reason. At least I am also a princess personally appointed by His Majesty, and I protect the face of Dasheng. Please find out the truth about this matter, otherwise I will never suffer such humiliation. At this point, the only thing that can hold on to Huyen Yili is probably his slightest fear of Dasheng. As soon as these words were spoken, Huyen Yili indeed fell silent. Tuya wanted to argue, but was stopped by Prime Minister Qi on the side. Wang Ting's death naturally requires investigation. As for Princess Yongping, who has a clear conscience, please assist in investigating the truth. I wonder what the Khan thinks. Wang Ting lost a slave, and Huyen Yili didn't care at all. Since someone proposed a solution, he had no reason to disagree and immediately spoke up, everyone, who is willing to investigate. Princess Tuya and Princess Dasheng would offend both sides if they couldn't handle it at once. Naturally, everyone refused to accept this hot potato. Even Prime Minister Qi, who had just taken the initiative to speak, voluntarily remained silent. Huyen Yili's face gradually darkened. At this moment, Huyen Su-feng, who had been watching the play from the side, lightly curled his lips and suddenly spoke. Since you all feel troubled, Father Khan, I am willing to share your worries. Everyone was surprised that the second prince, who had always been idle, had taken the initiative to cause trouble. That won't work. Tuya was the first to stand up and oppose, second brother, where do you know how to investigate cases? If you can't figure it out then, don't just help outsiders. Tuya was born by Kaduan, while Su Feng was born by the Shi family, not an Anna. Tuya and he are not usually close to each other. Let brother Xingqi go, he has always been the most fair and can definitely bring justice back for me. Tuya thought carefully, and by investigating the case, she could have more contact with brother Xingqi. Huyen Yili waved her hand and said, all right, you two go together and solve the case as soon as possible. Don't delay the conference in 2 days. Huyen Su-feng responded with a smile. Huyen Xingqi did not object either. After everything was arranged, he picked up his wine glass on his own and brought it to his lips. The wine glass lifted over his nose bridge, covering only a pair of eyes on the other side. Kaduan. Khan's legitimate wife. HAS. A collective term for the Khagan concubines. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. 5 Caught. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6-5. Arrested. After walking away from the golden tent, Pei Hua felt really uneasy. Chu Qinyan smiled softly and comforted her, sister, I really didn't kill her. You can rest assured. Just cut your hand and tongue. After returning to the big tent, Chu Qinyan felt strange. Is Huyen Tuya having a conflict with you? I ran into a maid grabbing a hairpin today, and she was surprised. How could a maid dare to trouble a newly married Princess Dasheng for no reason? Huyen Tuya has been targeting Pei Hua in Jinjiang today. Pei Hua sighed and said, there are only a few disciples of the appropriate age in the clan, all of whom may be my marriage partners, and Huyen Tuya likes Lord Yi Hu. Isn't Huyen Xingqi and Huyen Tuya uncles and nephews? Chu Qinyan was somewhat surprised. After a moment of silence, Pei Hua's face turned pale. Grassland people don't talk about human relationships. This kind of thing is commonplace here. After coming here for a while, Pei Hua has seen many things, such as blind dates between uncles and nephews, love between husband and daughter. And even mother-daughter serving together. The more simple the customs are, the more things are beyond imagination. The current concubine of the Khan, Lady Hyunduo, who gave birth to the second prince, was his father's concubine, who was also the Khan's stepmother. Although Tuya and this Lord Yi Hu are uncles and nephews, they are only 2 to 3 years apart. Everyone on the grassland knows that Princess Tuya has an interest in her and wants to become his wife. Relatively speaking, the situation of these two people is relatively normal, and Chang'an is not without this. Chu Qinyan frowned upon hearing this, and Pei Hua's face became even more conflicted. She held her hand and said, You have also seen that it is not easy to leave when you come to the grassland. Besides, if I leave, how can Dasheng explain to the grassland people? Explain to those cowards. Chu Qinyan sneered. Although Dasheng clearly had strong national strength, he would rather exchange a woman for peace. Sister, Song Luan is still waiting for you in Chang'an. Chu Qinyan's words completely stunned Pei Hua for a while, but she finally shook her head. You go. Your identity is not suitable to stay here forever. If you take me to escape, the Huyan tribe will raise an army against Dasheng, and I will be a criminal of my country. How can you explain to your majesty? Pei Hua's eyes were filled with sadness. Who said they're running away? Chu Qinyan chuckled lightly, but her gaze remained firm. From the beginning, I wanted to take you away with integrity. It's not empty talk. She has never been in hiding. Pei Hua came to make peace for her. She wanted to take people away, so naturally she had a good way out. Pei Hua was stunned for a moment. Her eyes became increasingly moist, and she nodded tearfully at Chu Qinyan. The body was placed on the grass outside. Huyan Xingqi stared at the corpse for a long time, not knowing what he was thinking. Huyan Sufeng invited Princess Yongping and asked a few simple questions. In the end, he felt bored as he watched her close her eyes and chant Buddha. His gaze drifted leisurely towards the calm-looking little slave beside her. My heart feels itchy. Uncle, what do you see? Huyan Sufeng leaned over and narrowed his eyebrows and eyes to look at the nearby Huyan star pool. Cut your hand and tongue, master. Fatal injury to your chest, caused by venting your anger. Hu Yanqing's words were concise and concise. Chu Qinyan lowered her head, her gaze fixed on the corpse on the ground without any trace, and she sneered inwardly. Uncle's meaning is that this injury was caused by two people. Huyan Sufeng immediately signaled to the guards beside him to check the body. The guards followed orders and looked through several parts of the body before getting up. 1. Cutting the hand and tongue is not fatal. The move is decisive and the incision is sharp. It should be a knife. The fatal wound is on the chest, with a small and rough incision, and flesh and blood rotting. It should have been deliberately tortured by someone, with tools like hairpins. After the guard finished speaking, he retreated to the side. However, Chu Qinyan rarely looked up and glanced at him with a slight curl on his lips. This guard has some skills. But not quite enough. Well done, Shang Tai. The most important thing is to find out who killed her and investigate those who have a personal grudge against her, especially women. A guard named Shang Tai was ordered to leave. After giving orders, Huyan Sufeng had no intention of staying and bid farewell to Huyan Xingqi. When passing by Pei Hua and his group, he deliberately stopped by Chu Qinyan's side. Jihua on the side was almost scared out of her wits, and Pei Hua also remained calm. Later, she only saw Huyan Sufeng approaching Chu Qinyan, his throat rolling, and his words were heart-wrenching. Dumb little, you look great. Huyen Sufeng chuckled and left. As people distance themselves, their fists become tighter. The murder weapon, isn't it a knife? A voice came from her side, and Chu Qinyan, who had not yet regained her senses, suddenly felt a chill all over her body. Everything around is quiet. Chu Qinyan didn't even lift her head, as if she hadn't heard him speak. Huyen Xingqi may not have discovered her, and she is now mute, so there is no need to react to what he said. Lord Yi Hu, if there's nothing else, I'll go back first. Pei Hua leaned forward and her gaze softened as she pulled away from the body, with Chu Qinyan following behind her. The Huyen star pool did not stop him, and his gaze was indifferent and cold, staring at a figure behind him. Suddenly, for no reason, he asked, "How is the injury on your shoulder?" After speaking, the figure of Pei Hua and his group had completely disappeared at the corner of a certain tent. Huyen Xingqi's face darkened. At this moment, Mutin leaned over from the body and looked puzzled. "What did you just say? What shoulder injury? The weapon is not a knife. Are you curious?" Huyen Xingqi glanced at him, and Mu Dan nodded naturally. "When you said the weapon wasn't a knife, I was surprised. Otherwise, why would I ask you?" "But there's someone, it's not strange at all," said Huyen Xingqi with a cold look in his eyes and a slight curl in his lips. If it were just those two slaves, even the Princess Yongping did not react, as if being a thief with a guilty heart. "Go and catch someone." Before Mutin could react, Huyen Xingqi was about to take action. He was slightly surprised and said, "Who should we catch?" "The slave with a mole on his forehead." "Are you saying that person next to Princess Yongping just now? Isn't he a mute?" Hu Yangxingqi sneered, "Even the mute has to speak to me." Note: the section on human relations is because it reminds me of the history of Emperor Zhaojun, without the meaning of regional black. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. 6 Two-Phase Game. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7-6. Two-Phase Game. As soon as she returned to the tent, Pei Hua couldn't help but tremble all over. However, she wasn't scared by the corpse, she was afraid of Chu Qinyan. "Ayan, have they already discovered you? What should we do?" Chu Qinyan fell silent. She felt that her reaction had been wrong earlier. Finally, Huyen Xingqi asked the question, "Shoulder injury," indicating that he had already suspected her. She was just skeptical. She was not sure if with the temperament of Huyen Xingqi, she would come directly to arrest her. She didn't know this person. Seeing her not speaking, Pei Hua became a bit anxious and said, "No, Wang Ting is too dangerous. I'll pack your things and you can leave now." Before she could finish speaking, a voice suddenly came from Chu Qinyan's ear. She looked at the big tent, frowned lightly, and then let go, "It's too late." Immediately, she quickly took off the silver ring from her hand and stuffed it into Pei Hua's hand. "Don't panic, remember every word I say next," she said. The sound of sparse footsteps echoed outside the tent, and Pei Hua listened to what Chu Qinyan said. Although worried, she still recorded everything. "Ayan, I will definitely not let you have anything to do." Pei Hua clenched the ring in her hand and watched as Chu Qinyan smiled and nodded at her. "Yes, I won't be fine. In fact, this is an opportunity." The person whom Mutin personally came to arrest, Chu Qinyan, was taken away as a suspect. Just as he was preparing to present his speech with a headache, the little mute was very happy to follow him. Even Princess Yongping did not intervene much. Chu Qinyan was imprisoned like this. It is said to be a prison, but the cells on the Grassland are not like those in Chang'an City. Instead, they have been locked in a wooden prison with many torture tools and blood stains clearly visible, indicating that the people who were previously locked in here have suffered a lot. But she was the only one in the entire prison. Chu Qinyan was tied up and locked up for 2 days. During these days, someone came to deliver food and water, but no one else came, except for a few little ants peeping at her from behind. As expected, Huyen Xingqi used the same treatment as a prisoner of war to weaken her will. But she didn't react, he should have understood. The grassland is the tranquility before the storm. However, at this time, Chang'an had already fallen out due to the disappearance of Chu Qinyan. At the gate of Chang'an City, a young man quickly rode his horse and said, "Song Luan, please move aside." Half a month ago, a team of people and horses set off towards the northwest, with the same number of people as the princess guard. Shen Yu is about to leave the city riding his horse. But he was stopped by Song Luan and pulled Shen Yu off his horse. "You're crazy. The envoy of Yun Zhao will soon enter the capital, and the Huyen tribe is watching closely. As a general of cavalry, how can you leave the capital at this time?" After getting off his horse, Shen Yu lifted his palm and said, "Who the hell is going crazy? Song Luan, you don't know who the princess is going to find on this trip." After a while, Song Luan came to his senses and said, "When this matter is over, I will personally go find Pei Hua and ask her about it." The Hulilatai conference is approaching, and the Huyen Star Pool has been living in the Wangting for the past few days. On the third day of Chu Qinyan's confinement, Mutin met Princess Yongping, who came to meet with Huyen Xingqi. "Are you here to ask for someone?" After Pei Hua came in, he bowed and Huyen Xingqi sat at the top without any intention of getting up. Instead, he asked her in a meaningful manner. Pei Hua did not admit or deny it. She stood up straightforwardly and said, "I'm here to offer advice." Huyen Xingqi didn't speak, but Mu Dan beside him joked, offering a plan. "Princess Yongping, what kind of plan are you going to offer?" Pei Hua ignored him, just calmly looking at the Huyen Star Pool. Even though the ring in her hand was tightly clenched, she never showed any timidity on her face. Her eyes were gentle, and she calmed down and said, "Tomorrow is the Huli Lutai conference, and after the conference, Lord Yi Hu's control over the army is in jeopardy." Huyen Xingqi looked up at her. "My strategy can help you solve your major problems," Pei Hua said slowly, suppressing her worries. For a moment, Mutin also remained silent. He couldn't believe that an enemy princess dared to make such remarks. After a while, the Huyen Star Pool opened. "Let's hear it." Pei Hua breathed a sigh of relief and looked at him firmly. "The military power must be placed with you. Tomorrow, we will hold a grand meeting in Lilitai, which may help you achieve success." This statement is ambiguous, and it seems that things that save lives will always be cherished even more. Huyen Xingqi sneered as he watched her. "Who taught you to say these words?" Pei Hua didn't answer, his eyes narrowed slightly, but he already understood. "That mute. What's your relationship with him?" Pei Hua's figure paused, his ring clenched even tighter in his hand. "It's not important who said it, what's important is that you need this strategy, right? Embark on a plan to attack the enemy, cutting straight to the vital point. The other party is a master." Huyen Xingqi hooked his lips, but there was no sign of joy or anger on his face. "It seems like it's not good not to see him," he said. Huyen Star Pool, Little Stars on the Grassland. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. 7 Self-Appointed Staff. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8-7. Self-Appointed Staff. On the third day, Chu Qinyan waited for someone. Lord Yi Hu, it's hard to invite someone. At that time, Chu Qinyan was counting the ants on the ground outside the wooden prison, surrounded by the sound of slaves sweating profusely. After her words fell, Huyen Xingqi appeared from the darkness and walked slowly towards her. "Isn't it mute? Why don't you pretend?" Chu Qinyan stood up, ignoring the sarcasm in his words. She gazed at the man in front of her, feeling for the first time that the person in the book was alive. Most grassland people have long hair scattered and braided, seeking wildness. Huyen Sufeng has a handsome face, but the person in front of him is wild and difficult to tame, making people feel a cold wind blowing over his face. Since Master Yi Hu has come here, he believes in me, so naturally I should be honest with him. She narrowed her eyebrows and eyes slightly, looking at him. Huyen Xingqi also looked at the Central Plains person in front of him, with delicate features, slightly curved long hair, and a neat appearance. Suddenly, he smiled. I really have a good appearance, no wonder Su Feng always comes to me these days to ask for someone. He spoke more subtly, but Chu Qinyan didn't smile. That adult should be careful, after all, the adult is so beautiful, so it's possible that the second prince took the opportunity to see you. Huyen Xingqi's gaze sank slightly. Tell me, it depends on your strategy. Is it worth my visit? Chu Qinyan faced him and leaned against the door frame. Ili Khan fears you, but I believe he fears Beihu even more. Tomorrow at the Hulatai conference, if he discovers the ambition of the North who tribes wolves, do you think he dares to reclaim your military power? At that time, in order to fear the Northern Hu, military power will have to be placed in the hands of the most skilled leader in warfare, the Huyen Xingqi. Coincidentally. Huyen Xingqi looked at her, his gaze regained its composure. Even Muten, who had been staying by his side all along, had no such thoughts. The Central Plains person in front of him actually had the same idea as him. What is your purpose? Huyen Xingqi looked at her. Chu Qinyan glanced at the wooden prison behind her and chuckled, find a reliable support to protect the person I want to protect. The person you want to protect. Princess Yongping. Are you here to follow her close attendant? Huyen Xingqi stared at her suspiciously. No, he has never seen such a skilled attendant. Huyen Xingqi sneered, I advise you to be honest. I don't accept people of unknown backgrounds here. It's really not easy to fool. This person's caution and cunning are on par with what is written in the records of the 4 continents. She is now under someone else's protection, and the guards have not contacted her, so they can only take a step and see. After a moment of silence, Chu Qinyan suddenly looked up and said, My name is Yan Qing, and I am a member of the clan of Princess Yongping. Because I am not confident that Sister A will come alone, I took the risk to enter the grassland. Huyen Xingqi stared at her, unable to say whether she believed or not. She gritted her teeth and half knelt. I am not talented, so I have appointed myself as a staff member. I only hope that Lord Yi Hu can save my siblings. Hu Yanqing's eyebrows and eyes twisted slightly. The person in front of him was seriously injured in the first battle that day, indicating his extraordinary skills and exceptional intelligence. But at the same time, it is also very dangerous. Your sister will marry the heir of the Khan, why should I save her? Huyen Xingqi did not answer directly. Yi Hu Mingjian, I naturally seek more than that. Chu Qing's face and eyes were firm. I want to take her out of the grassland and leave with dignity. The eyes of the Huyen star pool gleamed with a chill. He knew that the person in front of him had finally expressed his purpose. Do you know how much power is needed to make a married princess leave? And do you know what you're talking about? If it weren't for hearing this scene of blasphemy with his own ears, he wouldn't believe anyone would dare to be so bold on the grassland. I am aware of it. Chu Qing's eyes were clear and firm, so, my reward is enough to match my conditions. I will help you. Succeed. Success. She is blatantly asking him to take the throne. He becomes the next Khan, and Pei Hua will naturally become his Khan. At that time, he can let anyone leave because he has supreme power. Huyen Xingqi lived for nearly 20 years, and everyone around him advised him to hold back. Only the person in front of him allowed him to take the initiative. The feng shui of Chang'an is about nurturing more people. As someone like you, why have I never heard of the name Yan Qing? Chu Qinyan lowered her head and said, an unknown person, it's not worth mentioning. It was really unintentional to hurt Yi Hu that day. Huyen Xingqi's body stiffened, and his lower abdominal wound felt a faint pain. There's no need to mention this matter. So, as I mentioned earlier, Yi Hu agreed. He curled his lips and chuckled lightly, it depends on how you behave tomorrow. Here it is finally arrived at the most exciting place. Ayin Weiwu. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. 8 Battle. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9-8. Go to War. The Hulilitai Conference is the most important event on the Grassland, and surrounding tribes such as Beihu and Shirong come to participate. This conference is not only a military exchange conference among various tribes, but also a preliminary election conference for recommending khans. The rules are also simple. The inheritor needs to send out one candidate, as long as they pass the competition initiated by the other tribes in rotation to win. The one with the most clearance ranks first. In other words, Chu Qinyan not only took the opportunity to provoke disputes between the Huyan and Beihu tribes, but also helped Huyan Xingqi gain recognition from various tribes. When Huyan Xingqi arrived, Huyan Sufeng had been waiting for a long time. Uncle, can you count it? Should we still let that peony flower grow this year? He glanced behind the Huyan star pool, ready to mock a few words. Mutin rolled his eyes and remained silent. Hey, there's a newcomer this year. What's wearing a mask for? Huyan Su reached out after the wind turned, but was stopped by Huyan Xingqi's palm, his eyes slightly cold. Can't wait to lose. Huyan Sufeng chuckled twice. Both of them returned to their respective positions. Chu Qinyan stood behind the Huyan Star Pond, listening to Mu Dan's complaint, in previous years, it was me. He looks so thin and weak, can he handle it? He didn't know yet that it was Chu Qinyan who injured the Huyan Star Pool. Huyan Xingqi put down the teacup and whispered, in the past, you only fought within the tribe. This year, it's all the surrounding tribes. Are you sure you can handle it? Mutin choked and boasted, he may not be able to do it either. Chu Qinyan laughed and took the initiative to say, since you don't believe me so much, why don't we make a bet? What are you gambling on? Your position as Deputy General. Mutin widened her eyes and couldn't believe she would speak so loudly, okay. But the premise is. You have to enter the top 3 of the tribe. Deal. Chu Qinyan hugged her shoulders with both hands and smiled fearlessly. Huyan Xingqi glanced up at the two of them without speaking. After exchanging greetings from various tribes, the conference officially began. I'll come first. The participation of the Grand Prince Huyan Gujin was the first to take the stage, and his massive body shook the entire high platform. However, the top elites of each tribe were not vegetarians, and the two quickly got into a fight. Humph, Mang Fu. Huyan Sufeng disdained and turned his arms to his beautiful woman. This scene fell in Chu Qinyan's eyes, and goosebumps couldn't help but arise. The nearby Mu Dan approached her humbly and said, hey, you have to hide well. If Sufeng knew you weren't mute, his new favorite would be replaced. This statement is true. Even if I knew he was mute, during the days when Chu Qinyan was locked up, Huyan Sufeng came to ask for someone all day long. I'm really hungry and thirsty. I have never heard of Prince Huyan having this hobby before. Mutin smiled at her and said, how old are you? You've read a few books and can read a few words. It's normal not to have heard of them. Chu Qinyan was about to return him, but there was a burst of cheers on the field. Originally, the participating general of Huyan Gujin had come to an end, defeating a total of 6 tribes and 6 warriors. The great prince is truly divine and brave, and his subordinates are also so brave and skilled in battle. We admire him. Huyan Gujin laughed heartily, his face full of pride. Afterwards, other successors came on to challenge, but most of them lost to the 3rd or 4th place, so they gave up. Huyan Sufeng was very stable and had no intention of playing. Instead, he kept staring at Huyan Xingqi, seemingly waiting for him to take action. Next scene, you go up, said Huyan Xingqi. Chu Qinyan nodded and turned to remind Mu Dan, remember to vacate your space. Each tribe couldn't wait any longer. Before her people could come on stage, someone from the north Hu tribe shouted loudly, "I heard that Lord Yi Hu is the god of the Grassland wolf. Why hasn't he taken action yet? Is it because there is no one under his command and they are all useless?" This statement immediately triggered a burst of laughter. The Beihu tribe has always been powerful, and has long coveted Huyan. This provocation also caters to Chu Qingyan's intentions. Khan's face darkened as he looked towards the direction of the Huyan star pool. Is there not much time left for the envoy to be so eager? Chu Qingyan stood out in front of everyone's eyes. Everyone was surprised and skeptical. This person's physique looks so thin and weak that he actually wants to go on the court to attack. Is Yi Hu planning to give up directly? Undoubtedly, although Chu Qingyan has a tall and slender body, she is not considered short among men. However, the thin and small skeleton of women cannot be changed. The envoy of Beihu was very angry and sent someone to play first, but the person sent was different from the one who played before. Someone exclaimed. "Warrior Garo. Beihu, are you trying to put him in the first level?" "That's it, this kid is hanging. Garo is someone who can handle over 100 moves under Yi Hu's command." Chu Qingyan ignored everyone's words and, under the gaze of all directions, flew up. Her white clothes flew over in the air and gracefully landed on the high platform. Under Yi Hu's command, Yan Qing. "Humph, don't be such a gimmick." The North Hu envoy shouted from below. Jialua held a long sword and stared at Chu Qingyan from the moment she stepped onto the stage. "You didn't have a weapon. Have you ever fought with Huyan Xingqi?" Chu Qingyan didn't move and asked thoughtlessly. "Humph, it's just 100 moves," Garo arrogantly raised his head. Chu Qingyan chuckled lightly, his index and middle fingers clasped together to greet him. "No need, come on. This action is full of provocation." Garo raised his long sword and used his energy all over his body, attempting to force her to strike down the stage. However, when the sword fell, the opponent had already disappeared. Jialua was greatly surprised, and his instinct for battle made him slash behind him. The other party did indeed dodge behind him, and he dared not be careless anymore. The two quickly entangled and fought together. The time for a stick of incense. The audience's expressions are never unbelievable, to unbelievable, and then to extremely unbelievable. Clash. The long sword fell to the ground, and Chu Qingyan stepped on him. Jialua tried to stand up and resist, but the strength in his chest seemed to fall from 1,000 pounds, making him unable to move. He was panting heavily, even though his breathing began to be difficult. He couldn't believe that he only managed 100 moves and was defeated by an unarmed person. How could it be? Is this person even stronger than the Huyan star pool? Do you give up? Chu Qingyan leaned down on her knees, raised her eyebrows and smiled lightly. Garo blinked for a moment, unsure whether he was illuminated or laughed at by her. Eventually, he gave up struggling and collapsed to the ground. "I admit defeat." Chu Qingyan hooked her lips and pulled him up from the ground. "You're using your knife well, but you're lacking some flexibility," she said. She actually knows someone who uses a long sword with great skill. When Garo stepped down, everyone was shocked to the extreme. In their eyes, it was no different from an egg hitting a stone, and then the stone shattered. Victory. Yi Hu has won. The Huyan tribe is mighty. Ha! Under the stage, Huyan Xingqi looked at the people on stage with a clear and indifferent expression. He could clearly see Chu Qingyan's mouth shape when speaking to Jialua. "Within 100 moves, I will surely defeat you." An extremely beautiful battle. The Mu Dan behind him fried the pot. How can this guy be so powerful? It's over. Can I still hold my position as Deputy General? Don't worry, it's just one level. Ayin Weiwu. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. 9. This person, I want it. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. 9. This person, I want it pass 5 levels and slay 6 generals. In the blink of an eye, Chu Qinyan had already solved 7 people. Not to mention that everyone in the audience couldn't sit still. Huyen Sufeng frowned and looked at the masked boy. He was displeased and said, "Where did the Huyen Star Pool find anyone? This is taking my life." The 8th person on the field has arrived, from Shirong, who is the tribe that Huyen Xingqi has just defeated. This person has a bald head, eagle eyes and a hooked nose, and is not much taller than Chu Qinyan. He holds a long black iron whip and looks fierce. As soon as he stepped onto the stage, Chu Qinyan felt something was wrong. This person's footsteps were extremely shallow, and his body movements were bound to be light and agile. "Kid, I don't care if you use weapons or not. If you fall into my hands today, you're unlucky." As the words fell, a long whip was raised, pointing straight at Chu Qinyan's head. She quickly circled half a circle on the stage before evading, and the whip shattered the wooden platform behind her. Off stage, Pei Hua, who had just arrived, was scared to death. On the other side, Mu Dan also looked solemn. "What's the origin of this man? That iron whip is so powerful." "People from the western regions," Huyen Xingqi said as he looked at the stage with a light frown. After several rounds of fighting between the two, Chu Qinyan suddenly remembered the description of this person in the Four Continents Chronicles. Iron whip, bald, with a fierce face. Western regions. Russia. Black demon. In a moment of surprise, Chu Qinyan was found an opportunity by the black demon. The black iron whip crossed half of the field and hit her leg, attempting to entangle her lower body. Speaking late, then fast. A silver wire suddenly appeared and swept through the air, wrapped in an iron whip. The clanging sound entered the ears, and the silver wire fought against the iron whip, and the iron whip was unexpectedly cut off by life. And the silver thread was intact, taken back from her palm. Wow! The crowd was very enthusiastic and shocked. Mutin was shocked and said, "Let me go. What weapon is this kid holding? A single silver thread can cut off the black iron. That's black iron." No wonder he was shocked, because everyone thought so. With such a big gap, the impact on them was enormous. He used his internal strength to break the black iron. The eyes of Huyen Xingqi remained fixed on the person on stage, who had an exceptionally deep internal strength. On the stands, the black demon whose iron whip had been chopped off was almost irrational. The iron whip, with anger, roared over Chu Qinyan's head, "Dare to cut off my treasure, I want you to pay for it today." The black demon was not weak, and she made a desperate move. Chu Qinyan was really difficult to break through for a while, and was being chased and attacked on the stage. The black demon saw that she did not take action and gradually pushed her to the edge of the high platform. Everyone in the audience was eagerly anticipating the upcoming outcome, and Pei Hua felt even more anxious when she saw this scene. "Go to hell!" Chu Qinyan was forced to a dead end, and the black demon's final blow was ready to throw her off the high platform. The iron whip blocked all the escape routes. The black demon sneered, unless he could fly, he wouldn't die or be seriously injured if he were whipped down. It's simply an unsolvable situation. Huyen Xingqi looked at the movement of the figure on the stage and suddenly spoke to Mu Dan, "Watch it. If you can learn this move, you will be invincible in the army." Ah! That move! In Mutin's surprised eyes, the people on stage rose to power. At the same time as the black demon's iron whip swung towards her, Chu Qinyan jumped up and grabbed the iron whip with her bare hands, pulling it down and jumping off the high platform. The black demon was unresponsive, and the iron whip was so powerful that it took him off the high platform at a faster speed. Looking at Chu Qinyan again, he flipped in the air and stepped on the shoulder of the black demon. However, the black demon struggled desperately and threw the iron whip at her head. Chu Qinyan dodged in time, and the iron whip only brushed past her mask. The white clothes passed by, and she landed steadily on the high platform. The mask fell at her feet. The air remained quiet for a moment, and everyone seemed to have not calmed down. Until the black demon hit the ground heavily, the dust it lifted covered the faces of the people in the first row. Victory. Yi Hu's people have won, Yan Qing has won. I am truly the one under Yi Hu's tent, truly handsome and mighty. Good. Humph, even little Shirong is trying to compete with us. Everyone was immersed in extreme excitement, the people of Shirong couldn't believe it, while the rest of the tribes were gloating. Huyen Sufeng widened his eyes even more, wishing to stare a hole in the people on stage. This little mute tricked him so hard. Only the Huyen star pool trembled slightly when it saw the hands of the people on stage with their backs behind them. Except for Beihu and Shirong, the people of the other tribes didn't do anything wrong. After defeating the 13th person, Chu Qingyan suddenly felt bored. Before the 14th person came on stage, she gracefully stepped down. There are dozens of tribes, big and small, and she has to leave some room for the people who come next as expected by her and Huyen Xingqi. She had just stepped down when the guard named Shang Tai next to Huyen Sufeng took the stage and passed by her in the wrong direction. Chu Qingyan's mouth curved slightly in an imperceptible curve. Returning full of glory. Chu Qingyan is well aware that today's battle is enough to make her famous in the Huyen tribe. Qiao, brother. Since she returned, Muden has been tactfully silencing, and he has no choice but to comply. In the 7th scene, the people of Huyen Sufeng encountered the brave warrior Jialua from Beihu, and a sudden incident occurred. Jialua suddenly went crazy and dealt a fatal blow to Shangtai. Shangtai was stabbed in the shoulder by him, and for a moment, his blood flowed incessantly. However, Jialua did not intend to stop. Stop it. Don't maliciously harm others in the competition. Is Beihu trying to rebel? In a blink of an eye, a dagger repelled the long sword that was cutting towards Shangtai, and the Huyen star pool fell to the stage in an instant. He quickly took action and hit the 2 acupoints of Garo, causing the other person to calm down and appear somewhat confused. Is the Beihu envoy intending to provoke tribal wars? Huyen Xingqi looked up at the North Hu envoy. The Beihu envoy never expected that Garo would do this, but Beihu did not need to fear the Huyen tribe. He looked up and straightened his back, even feeling a bit proud. Garo is just making a normal move, it's just that you're too weak. Can we blame us for being too strong? Huyen Xingqi lowered his gaze, but his gaze unintentionally turned to the face of Khan, who was pale with iron. Very good, Ji Cheng. Khan's tent. Huyen Xingqi won first place, which severely defeated the confidence of other tribes, but Huyen Ili remained calm with a calm face. He looked at his 2 sons with a hint of displeasure. When Yan Qing stepped forward to listen to the seal, Su Feng from Huyen suddenly spoke up, Father Khan, I have a heartless request from my son. Speak. Chu Qingyan glanced at Huyen Su Feng and silently felt a bad premonition in her heart. My son has set his sights on this person. Unfortunately, he is homeless and his subordinates are seriously injured. Currently, there is no one available to use him. I would like to ask Father Khan to bestow this person on my account. Snatching people. Mu Dan raised his eyebrows and was about to speak, but was silently stopped by the Huyen star pool. Ili remained silent for a moment, and indeed had the intention of agreeing. Since that's the case. Not appropriate. At present, Beihu is eyeing closely, and Yan Qing is an indispensable general in the army. Huyen Xingqi raised his eyes, his tone cold and thin, but his gaze fixed on Chu Qingyan. I'll take this person. Star quote. I want this person. End of this chapter.